All right, this is the last video out of chapter 8. If you haven't watched the video on karyotypes and non-disjunction, I would recommend that you go back and look at that video because this video is talking about the consequences of non-disjunction. So non-disjunction again is just the unequal distribution of chromosomes during meiosis, so the chromosomes don't get split correctly and you end up with too few or too many of the chromosomes in your gametes. One of the conditions that shows up because of this unequal distribution is what we see in this individual's karyotype. You can see that all of our chromosomes here are paired up and all of the chromosomes have the correct number until we get down here to chromosome number 21. Now some people might look over here at these two chromosomes and say, well, those don't have a pair, but remember that sex chromosomes, they are either XX, so they'd be in a pair, or you can have XY. If you have a Y, you're a guy. So in this instance, these are actually a pair because we have a male. But over here, we do have a karyotype that has an unusual number of chromosomes because there should just be 2, but there are 3. This is called trisomy 21. Tri for 3. The other name for this condition is Down syndrome. You may be familiar with that. Individuals with Down syndrome show a wide variety of issues due to this one extra copy of the chromosome. Some of the symptoms people are familiar with, things like learning disabilities. However, there are other things like physical characteristics that come along with this extra copy. For example, generally people who have Down syndrome are shorter in height. They also tend to have very flat facial features, and their tongues are much wider usually than other individuals, which is what makes speech difficult for many individuals who have this extra copy. They also tend to have digestive issues and heart issues more commonly than the general population. All of this just from one extra chromosome. Other chromosomes, as far as we know, generally if the number, the chromosome number is above 19, or I'm sorry, below 19, so chromosome 1 through 19, if you have a trisomy, you won't be born with it. We have a few individuals who have been born with trisomies of 19, 18, 17. However, they don't live for very long. There are individuals who have trisomies of 20 and 22. 22 doesn't seem to have huge effect. The most common trisomy, other than trisomy 21, is actually trisomies of the sex chromosomes. And there is another thing that we have show up as far as sex chromosomes, which is you can actually have too few of the sex chromosomes and still survive. So we're going to take a look at a few of those real quickly. So these are all conditions, again, related to non-disjunction, where those chromosomes get unequally divided and you end up with the wrong number of chromosomes. So let's take a look at the condition where you have too few. This only happens with the X chromosome. So you cannot be born with just a Y. Turns out that there are a lot of important genes on the X chromosome that are required for life. So you can be born with just an X chromosome, so a single sex chromosome. It can either come from the mom or the dad, the male or the female. As you can see here, it can come in the sperm, it can come in the egg, and then be missing the sex chromosome in the other parent. Individuals who have this characteristic, they're going to have what we call Turner syndrome. I'm not going to test you on what the syndromes are. I just want you to be familiar with the fact that this kind of thing can happen. You can see that there are characteristics that come along with having just a single sex chromosome. So they are generally shorter in height. This web skin between the neck and shoulders, what that means is that they have more of a slope here rather than a more defined bend. The biggest issue that people who, well, specifically women who have Turner syndrome, because they only have an X, that means they're female, run into is that their ovaries don't develop. And so since their ovaries don't develop correctly, they mainly are going to be sterile. And so they may have some learning difficulties. That isn't guaranteed. So most often, this is what is going to be found if they go in to have fertility testing. If the other characteristics aren't clear, this is usually how they find out. We have the rest of the non-disjunction problems are with too many sex chromosomes. So here we've got XXY. Now, remember, if you have a Y, you're a guy, so this is a male, even though they have two X chromosomes. And you can see again that extra X can come from mom or from dad. And this one has its own name as well, Klinefelter Syndrome. Again, not going to ask you to remember the names, but you can see there are some side effects that come along with having an extra X. So they will sometimes have underdeveloped testes, low testosterone levels. These two are actually tied together and usually will make the male infertile because they don't develop those sperm cells correctly. They may develop some female features, but that doesn't mean that they will. And then they may have longer limbs and be slightly taller than average. But again, with the variation that we have in our population, that's not going to be something that sticks out compared to everyone else. Now we do have variation in the chromosomes going slightly differently, where instead of XXY, you get XYY, where you get an extra Y chromosome, where both of the Y chromosomes end up in the sperm instead of getting split up. Now these sometimes are called super males. However, there's nothing really majorly different about these guys. You can see they may be taller than average, they may have worse acne, their intelligence may be slightly lower than average, but it doesn't really change anything as far as their fertility. It doesn't make any major changes in their body. So we generally don't find out if you're an XYY male unless you have to have some sort of genetic testing done. The same is true with XXX females. So here the two X's come from mom and then the X also comes from dad. Now, XXX females generally only find out that this is the case if they need fertility testing done, or they have some other genetic test done, because the most common way that they find out is because they're having problems conceiving. Because if they are not having any luck conceiving, they may have this test done and find out that they're not producing any eggs because of this genetic issue. So you can see there's no obvious physical or mental things that come along with this condition. These are just some of the sex chromosome issues that can show up as far as having too many sex chromosomes. We actually have individuals in the population that have multiple copies because of other non-disjunction and just copy errors that show up. So there are actually individuals that have, you know, XXXX and so on that are perfectly fine. So the sex chromosomes are the one set of chromosomes that seem to be okay for us to have multiple copies of. The other ones, it ends up with too many copies of the information, and that tends to disrupt the function of our body. All right, so that is the end of Chapter 8. Please let me know if you have any questions or you find that things are not covered from the videos. Everything should be covered in the videos from the lecture note sheets, but you can certainly email me if you have any questions, and obviously you can also ask questions when we have our first online office hours. So I hope to hear from you soon. Bye!